The dark in the room has no edges yet. Rivka lies still for a moment, listening to it, the way she listens every morning before she lets herself move. Somewhere below, on Orchard Street, a cartwheel catches a loose cobble and clatters once, twice, then rolls on smooth. A dog answers it far off, then gives up. The window over the air shaft shows no light at all, only a paler kind of black where the glass is, and a thread of cold comes through the frame and lies along her arm like a hand. Avram is already awake beside her. She can tell by his breathing, which has changed from the long pull of sleep to something shorter, waiting. Neither of them says anything for a while. The bed is the only soft thing in the room, and neither wants to be the first to leave it. Under the blanket, doubled and then doubled again, the two of them make a small, close warmth. And everywhere outside that warmth, the air is the flat cold of a November not yet arrived, though it is only the last week of August, and the nights have started, without asking permission, to turn. Somewhere past the wall that is not quite a wall, more a curtain of flowered cotton strung on a wire. Sorrel turns over on the cot she shares with her brother, and the springs give a small metal sigh. Yankel does not stir. He sleeps like a stone dropped from a height, face down, one arm flung wide, and it will take more than the cot's small complaints to reach him. Avram sits up first. He always does, in the end, no matter how long the silence runs, because the presser at Blaustein's shop unlocks the door at 6:30, whether or not there is a man from Orchard Street standing outside it. And lateness is a thing Mr. Blaustein remembers the way other men remember debts owed to them. Avram swings his legs down, and his feet find the floor, which is cold enough that his breath draws in through his teeth, a small private hiss meant for no one. He feels along the chair for his trousers, which he folded the night before with more care than the trousers deserve, out of some old habit from a village where a man's one good pair of trousers had to last from one Yom Kippur to the next. Rivka rises when he does. There is no true choice in it. The stove will not light itself, and a house with 5 people in it and no fire lit by 6 is a house that falls behind before the day has properly begun, and a day that falls behind is very hard, in a railroad flat 3 rooms deep and 1 room wide, to catch up again. She finds the match tin by feel on the shelf beside the stove and strikes one. And for a second, the small room leaps out of the dark hole, the stove's black flank, the pot hanging from its nail, the low shelf of dishes, Avram's braces hanging from the back of a chair like a man's shape gone thin and flat. She touches the match to the shavings and old newsprint she banked the coals with the night before, and blows gently twice, the way her mother taught her, not so hard as to scatter the little flame before it has caught hold of anything solid. It licks up along the paper, orange and small, and then finds the wood, and the wood finds itself burning, and she can feel the first true warmth of the day arrive against her knuckles. The coal will not go on until the wood has properly caught. Coal is dear enough, at 4 cents the pail from Rosenzweig's cellar down the block, that a woman who wastes it, feeding a young fire, earns herself a scolding from her own conscience, if from no one else. Rivka waits, crouched, feeding in a few more sticks, watching the light climb the wall of the stove and throw a low-moving gold across the floor, across her bare feet, across the seam of the boards where, in July, when the heat pressed in from every side and would not lift even at midnight, she used to lie flat to feel any coolness the wood might still be holding from the cellar below. Behind her, the flat is coming slowly to life in the particular way of a household that has done this every morning for years and does not need to speak to manage it. She hears Avram at the basin, the small tin dipper knocking the enamel, water poured, and the quick indrawn breath of a man washing his face in water that has not yet had the chance to be anything but cold. He works fast, not because he minds the cold especially, but because there is not much water in the pail, and Sorrel will want some for the children before school, and after her, whatever is left goes to the dishes. The pail itself came up the night before, the last of 4 trips Sorrel made down 4 flights and along the hall to the tap that serves this floor and the one below it, a tap shared by 6 families, its handle worn smooth and slightly loose from 10,000 turnings. In the morning, the pail is never full enough, and this is one of the quiet arithmetic problems that runs under every hour of Rivka's day. How much water, how much coal, how much bread, how much time, set against how many mouths and how many hours of light left before the lamp has to be lit, and the kerosene at 9 cents the gallon counted out against how long the month still has to run. The bread is yesterday's, a full loaf and part of another, wrapped in a cloth on the shelf, going a little dry at the crust, but nothing that a smear of schmaltz or a dip in tea will not soften. She cuts 4 thick slices and 1 thin one. Thin because it is for the baby, who will worry it in his gums more than eat it, gumming the crust to paste before he is done with it, and sets the kettle where the fire has begun to answer for itself, humming low against the pot's black underside. Avram comes to stand near the stove while he waits for the water to properly boil, working his suspenders up over his shoulders, and for a moment the 2 of them stand close together in the small warm circle the stove throws, not speaking, the way people who have lived pressed against each other in 3 rooms for 9 years learn to stand together without needing to fill the quiet with words. His shirt, which was white once, has gone the pale gray yellow of a shirt washed too many times in water that was never quite hot enough. Under the arms it has begun to go thin, though Rivka has turned the collar for him twice already this year and can turn it once more before it is beyond turning. He drinks his tea black, no milk in it, though there will be milk for the children when the milkman's wagon comes by around 7-10 cents the quart. Watered a little, everyone on the block agrees, but not so much a body can complain to his face without being laughed at by the whole street. He drinks it fast, standing, the glass, not a cup, a glass. Tea is drunk from a glass in this house as it was in his mother's house in a shtetl whose name the children have never learned to pronounce right, held by its rim between 2 fingers, so the heat of it does not travel up into his hand. The window over the air shaft has gone from black to a bruised gray while the kettle boiled, though no true daylight has yet found its way down the 6 floors of brick to reach them. That will come later, thin and reluctant, filtered through lines of washing strung across the shaft on ropes and pulleys, through someone else's window, through the smoke of 40 other stoves being lit in this same hour up and down this same block. For now the gray is only a suggestion that the night has agreed somewhere above the roofs to end. Avram eats standing, the bread in one hand, working the last of his tea down in swallows that are almost too fast to be comfortable, because Blaustein's is 11 blocks north and the walk takes the better part of half an hour if he does not hurry, and he would rather hurry now on a full stomach and with the cold air still sharp in his lungs than hurry later with Blaustein's eye already on the clock. He is a presser, not a cutter, which means his hands will be scalded pink by 9 o'clock and will stay that way more or less for the rest of his working life, the heat of the iron driven down through the wet pressing cloth and up into his palms in a way no glove yet made has managed to turn aside. He does not think about this in the morning. In the morning there is only the tea, the bread, the door. He kisses Rivka's temple, not her mouth, because his own mother did it that way, and some things a man carries forward without asking why. And he touches the mezuzah at the door frame with 2 fingers on his way out and brings the fingers to his lips. And then the door closes behind him with the particular soft double click of a lock that has been oiled by hand, because the landlord will not send anyone to fix a door that still, after all, closes. Rivka stands another moment in the stove's warmth before she goes to wake the children. Down in the street, faint, she hears the first wagon of the morning, iron-bound wheels loud on the cobbles, a horse's iron shoes striking sparks she cannot see but has heard described so often by Yankel that she sometimes believes she has. The city is coming awake around her, floor by floor, street by street, the way it does every morning of the world, and she has perhaps 4 minutes left of it, being only hers. She uses them. Then she goes to the curtain and draws it back and says the children's names, softly first, the way you wake something that might still be dreaming and deserves a moment's grace before the day arrives to claim it. Sorel wakes the way she always does, all at once, eyes open and already reaching for the day as though it were something she had left unfinished the night before. She is 12, and at 12, a girl in this house is already something more than a child, though not yet quite what her mother is, and she carries the space between those 2 things easily, the way she carries the water pail, without complaint and without being asked twice. Yankel is another matter. He has to be shaken by the shoulder, and even then he surfaces slowly, blinking in the gray light, one cheek printed red from the seam of the pillow ticking, and he says something that is not quite a word before he remembers where he is and who is asking him to be there. Across the front room, behind a second curtain strung along the wall nearest the window, Mendel Fishbein is already sitting up on his own cot, pulling his boots on. He boards with them, has boarded with them since the spring, paying $1.50 a week for the corner of the front room and a share of whatever is in the pot, and in exchange for the arrangement, the flat has 1 more pair of hands to help with the rent and 1 more presence to remember around, 1 more set of habits to fit the day's rhythm to. He is a quiet man, older than Avram by a decade, a tailor by trade, a bachelor who keeps whatever history he has folded away as neatly as his Sabbath coat, and the not asking and the not telling have become, between the 4 grown people under this roof, a kind of courtesy so total it no longer feels like restraint at all. He nods to Rivka on his way past the stove, murmurs a good morning in Yiddish, and goes down to the hall tap with the second pail before she can send Sorel, because it is a small thing he can do, and he likes, she thinks, having small things he can do. The baby wakes last and loudest. Fege is not yet 2, and her waking is a matter of small experimental sounds that build over a minute or 2 into something with real conviction behind it, and Rivka lifts her out of the low crib wedged between the wall and the dresser and holds her against one shoulder while she goes on turning the bread with the other hand, because a woman raising 4 people besides herself learns early that very few tasks in a day can actually be done one at a time, whatever the task might prefer. Sorrel dresses behind the curtain in the brown wool skirt let down twice already at the hem and let out once at the waist, a skirt that started life as her mother's and has been traveling downward through the family's hands and years the way most good cloth in this house eventually does, waste being a sin nobody here needs a rabbi to explain to them. Yankel pulls on knee trousers gone shiny at the seat, a shirt with a collar that Rivka scrubbed the night before at the second wash of the week, and he is dressed and out from behind the curtain and reaching for bread before Sorrel has finished with her buttons, because dressing to a 9-year-old boy is a task to be gotten through rather than attended to. They eat standing or perched on the 2 chairs, or Yankel this morning crouched on the windowsill with his heels hooked on the frame, chewing his bread and watching the air shaft the way another child might watch a stage, because 6 floors of windows face into that shaft, and there is always something happening in one of them, a woman shaking a cloth, a man shaving by a scrap of mirror nailed beside his own sash, someone's parrot 2 floors down and 1 window over screaming a word in Italian that nobody in this building can translate, but that everyone, after 2 years of hearing it every morning, has learned to say back. Rivka pours milk for the children when the wagon's bell sounds far off down the street, catching the sound before it fully arrives and sending Sorrel down with the pitcher and 2 pennies, because the milkman does not climb 6 flights for anyone, and a family that wants milk meets him at the curb the way every other family on the block does, in a loose, short line of women and children with pitchers and pails trading gossip while they wait their turn. Sorrel is back within 10 minutes, the pitcher's rim beaded with cold, and reports, because there is always something to report, that Mrs. Adler's boy has a new dog, and that the dog does not like the milk wagon's horse, which does not like the dog either, and that the whole business made a noise on Orchard Street loud enough to bring 2 men out of the barber shop to watch. While the children eat, Rivka clears a space at the end of the table for herself, not to sit, not yet, but to lay out the morning's work, because the day's real labor, the labor that will run under everything else like water under ice, is the bundle of trousers that came up from the contractor 2 days ago and must go back down, finished by Thursday evening. She unties the twine and lets the bundle fall open. 24 pairs of men's work trousers, cut and half sewn at the factory, sent out to homes like this one across the whole ward to be finished by hand. The waistbands fell down, the buttons set, the hems turned and stitched. Piecework, paid by the dozen, $1.10 the load if the stitches are even and the deadline met, less if either falls short. She works it out in her head the way she works out everything now, almost without noticing she is doing it. 24 pairs, $1.10, against 4 cents for coal and 10 cents for milk and rent, due Friday at $4.50 for 3 rooms and no water closet of their own, only the one in the yard shared with 11 other families, its door banging in the wind at all hours, as though the building itself were trying, without much hope, to get someone's attention. She will not sit to the trousers until the children are gone and the baby is down for her morning sleep, because piecework wants 2 free hands and an unbroken hour, and neither is available yet. For now, she only smooths the topmost pair flat on the table, feels the wool under her palm, coarse, honest cloth, the kind that will outlast the man who wears it, and sets the small tin box of buttons beside it where it will be waiting. Sorrel and Yankel leave together at 8:20, Sorrel's hand closing without thinking around her brother's collar to straighten it before he ducks away from her, both of them clattering down the stairs past doors that are already on every landing, giving off their own morning smells. Onions frying somewhere on the 3rd floor, a baby crying behind the door across from the Levinsohns, the sharp, clean smell of naphtha soap from a wash tub already going on the 2nd floor, though it is not yet 8:30 in the morning. Public School 42 is 6 blocks off, and they know the way they know the shape of their own hands, past the push-cart men setting up their stands for the day, past the ice wagon just beginning its rounds, the iceman's tongs slung over one shoulder, and a block already sweating a dark trail down the tailboard of his wagon. Rivka watches them go from the window, 2 small heads bobbing down into the stream of the street, and then she turns back to the room, which has gone quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet when it has just released half its noise into the world outside. Feige has settled finally thumb in mouth against the crib's rail. Mendel has gone to his own corner with a coat he is basting for a customer of his own, working quietly, the needle catching what little light comes down the shaft. And Rivka sits, at last, and draws the first pair of trousers toward her and threads her needle by feel before her eyes have properly adjusted to the gray morning light, because her hands, after 9 years of this work, no longer need her eyes to tell them what to do. The morning goes by and the small sounds of the needle, the drag of thread through wool, the click when she sets a button and works the shank tight, the particular sigh she gives without meaning to each time she finishes a pair and reaches for the next. Mendel's needle keeps its own rhythm across the room, slower than hers, more careful, a tailor's stitch rather than a finisher's. Feige sleeps an hour and a half, which is a good stretch for her, long enough that Rivka gets through 5 pairs before the small sounds start again behind the crib rail, the working of a mouth, a fist finding its way up to rub at an eye, and then the day's second waking, gentler than the first. By 11, the light in the shaft has climbed enough that Rivka can set the trousers down without losing her place, because there is marketing to do, and marketing is a thing best done at midday, when the push-cart men have had time to lay their stock out properly and have not yet begun marking it down for the evening rush, but also not so early that the choice pieces are gone to the women who came before her. She wraps Feige in a shawl against the day's cool edge, tucks the market basket over her free arm, and takes the stairs down, floor by floor, past smells and sounds that have changed entirely since the morning. Someone's radio of gossip carried floor to floor through open doors, a woman singing over a washboard, the thump of a rug being beaten from a rear window into the yard below. Hester Street at midday is a river with no banks. The carts stand too deep along the curb from corner to corner, their awnings a patchwork of faded stripes, and the noise of it reaches her half a block before she turns onto it. The calling of prices, the particular musical shout of a man selling herring, pitched against the flatter, more business-like cry of the woman beside him, selling thread and buttons and paper collars from a board laid across 2 barrels. The smell arrives in layers as she walks. Pickle brine from the barrels outside Gus's, sharp enough to catch at the back of her throat. Then warm bread from the bakery cart, The crust smells so good it is almost its own kind of nourishment. Then fish, cold and clean, laid out on chipped ice that is already, this late in the morning, beginning to weep into the gutter. She goes first to the vegetable cart she trusts, run by a heavy red-faced man named Sussman, who has weighed her potatoes fair for 3 years running, and who greets Feige, as he greets every baby on his stretch of curb, with a small piece of carrot held out on one broad palm. Potatoes are 1.50 the pound today, onions a penny, and she buys enough of both to see the family through several days, since neither spoils quickly and both stretch a pot of soup further than almost anything else the cart offers. She turns over a few of the potatoes before she chooses, feeling for soft spots with her thumb the way her own mother taught her on a different street in a different country. And Sussman waits without hurrying her, because a customer who checks her potatoes is a customer who will be back. Cabbage is 2 cents the head, and she buys one, thinking already of Friday and the pot that will need filling for Shabbos, when even a week gone thin at the edges finds a way to set a better table than the other 6 days manage. A woman beside her at the same cart is arguing, good-naturedly but with real intent, over the price of carrots, and Rivka half listens without meaning to, the way everyone on this street listens to everyone else's business without quite admitting to it, because privacy is a thing that belongs to wider streets than this one. Bread she buys from the baker 2 carts down, a long, warm loaf still faintly hot through its paper wrapping, 3 cents, and she resists breaking a piece off for Fage, only because she knows that once broken, the loaf begins losing its evening usefulness, and Fage has had her carrot from Sussman and can wait. Eggs, when she finds a cart with any worth having, are 18 cents the dozen, dearer than she likes, and she buys only 6, turning each one to the light out of old habit, before she settles it into the basket among the potatoes, careful the way a woman is careful with anything that costs what an egg costs, and can be lost with one wrong step on an uneven cobble. She stops longest at the pushcart with dry goods, spools of thread in every weight, papers of pins, buttons loose in trays by the gross, because Sorel's boots have begun to split at the seam, and a bit of waxed thread and a stout needle, if Mendel will lend his all this evening, might buy the boots another month before a cobbler has to be paid to do properly what a mother can do roughly for nothing. She buys a spool for 2 cents and a paper of pins she does not strictly need, but which will not go to waste either, not in a house where pins vanish into hems and waistbands the way water vanishes into dry ground. All along the curb, the wagons move through the crowd at a walk, the drayman calling out for the crowd to give way, and twice Rivka has to draw back onto the sidewalk proper, Fege's weight shifting against her hip, while a beer wagon or a coal cart eases past close enough that she can smell the horse's warm hide and hear the creak of its harness leather. An elevated train passes somewhere off toward the Bowery, its sound arriving not as a roar, but as a long iron sigh under everything else, familiar enough by now that she barely marks it, the way a person stops hearing their own clock. She meets Mrs. Perlman outside the fish cart, and they stand a few minutes exchanging the small currency of women who live 4 doors apart and see each other most days without ever quite managing to sit down together, whose baby is cutting a tooth, whose husband's shop has taken on more piecework this month, whether the rent collector came round early again this week, the way he has taken to doing since the new agent replaced the old one. Mrs. Perlman's own girl, a little older than Sorrel, has gone to work in a shirtwaist shop on Division Street, and there is pride in the way she says it, and something else besides, something Rivka recognizes because she carries the same weight herself, the particular arithmetic of a mother measuring what a child gains against what she gives up to gain it. By the time Rivka turns back toward home, the basket has grown heavy on her arm, and Fega has grown heavy against her hip. In the particular way of a child working up toward a nap she does not want to admit she needs. The walk back is shorter than the walk out always feels, the way a walk home generally is, and she climbs the 6 flights slowly, resting once on the 3rd floor landing, where the stairwell window lets in a little more light than the others. Fega's head warm and heavy against her shoulder, the basket's handle printing a red line across her forearm that will fade, she knows from long practice, by supper time. The afternoon settles into the shape it takes most days, a shape worn smooth by repetition, the way a stair tread wears smooth under years of the same feet. Rivka puts the potatoes and onions into the bin beneath the sink, wraps the bread, sets the eggs where Yankel's elbow will not find them, and returns to the trousers with the particular relief of a woman coming back to a task that at least does not argue with her the way marketing sometimes does. Fege goes down for a second, shorter sleep, worn out by the street's noise and the walk itself. And in the quiet that follows, Rivka works steadily through pair after pair, waistband buttons, hem, waistband buttons, hem, the rhythm settling into her shoulders and wrists until her mind is free to wander even while her hands stay bound to the cloth. She thinks, stitching, of small things, whether Sorrel's boots will truly hold until the new thread has done its work, whether Avram's collar will survive one more turning, whether there will be enough in the tin behind the flour bin come Friday to cover both the rent and a bit of fish for Chabez, since a table with no fish on it feels to her still, after 9 years in this country, like a table that has forgotten what day it is. The needle does not slow while she thinks these things. It has long since stopped needing her full attention, and this, she has decided, without ever quite deciding it, is one of the few mercies the work allows her, that her hands can labor while some other quieter part of her sits back and rests, or worries, or simply watches the light change in the shaft outside the window. A knock comes a little past 2, 3 short raps she knows before she opens the door, and it is the iceman's boy making his rounds a floor at a time, calling the sizes up the stairwell so each flat can signal what it wants by holding up fingers or a card in the window below. Rivka takes a 10-cent piece, the largest block the icebox on the landing can hold, and the boy hefts it up the last flight with his tongs, dripping a trail behind him the whole way, and settles it into the box with a grunt and a nod and is gone again, before she has finished thanking him, already calling out the next order down the stairwell. The block will keep the milk and the little dab of butter safe through the evening, though by morning, in August's lingering warmth, it will have shrunk to something not much bigger than a fist, and there will be a small damp puddle on the landing floor for whoever passes first to step around. Mendel breaks from his own work an hour later to walk down for the coal, since carrying a full pail up 6 flights is not work Rivka minds doing, but is work she is glad, on a day when her back has already bent over a sewing table since 8 in the morning, not to have to do. He comes back smelling of the cellar, that cool mineral smell of stone and dust that clings to a man for an hour after he has left it, and he banks the little stove without being asked, because he has lived in this flat long enough now to know its habits nearly as well as its own family does. The light in the shaft begins, sometime after 3, to take on the particular slant that means the afternoon is turning, though it will be hours yet before true evening comes. Rivka finishes the 11th pair of trousers and allows herself briefly to straighten her back and press both hands flat against the small of it, a motion so habitual it has become almost a kind of clock, marking the day's hours as reliably as the church bells 2 streets over. The children come home a little after 3:30, and she hears them before she sees them, their voices rising up the stairwell along with a dozen others, because school lets out at the same hour up and down the ward, and every stairwell on the block fills at once with the particular clatter of children released. Sorel comes in first, setting her slate and reader on the shelf with the neat exactness she brings to most things, and reports, in the voice of someone delivering news of real importance, that she was given a gold star for her sums, and Rivka says the things a mother says, and means them, and sends her to change out of her school dress before it meets whatever the afternoon has waiting for it. Yankel does not come in at all, not properly, only leans through the door long enough to drop his cap and announce that he is going down to play before supper, and is gone again down the stairs 2 at a time before Rivka can do more than call after him to mind the traffic on Orchard Street, a warning she gives every day, and that he hears, she suspects, the way a person hears rain, present, constant, not quite worth stopping for. Down in the street, the games have already started by the time Sorel, dress changed, permission granted, goes down herself, with a jump rope worn soft at the handles from years of other children's hands before hers. The street belongs to the children at this hour in a way it belongs to no one else at any other. Boys chalking a diamond onto the cobbles for a game of stickball, using a broom handle and a rubber ball scarred from 100 bad bounces off tenement stoops, scattering when a wagon comes through and reassembling behind it before the dust has settled. Girls turning rope in pairs. The ropes slap against the stone, keeping time under a rhyme chanted fast enough to trip the turners as often as the jumper. Smaller children playing at marbles in the gutter, kneeling on the cobbles, heedless of what the day has left there. Sorel joins a game already going, falls into its rhythm the way she falls into most things, counting turns of the rope under her breath, and for a while she is only a girl on a street full of girls, nothing in her bearing to say that an hour ago she was bent over a slate earning a gold star, and that in another hour she will be bent again, this time over a needle, helping her mother finish the last of the trousers before the light fails entirely. Yankel's stickball game runs the length of the block and back twice before it dissolves, as such games always do, into an argument over whether a ball that struck a stoop's 3rd step counted fair or foul, an argument settled not by any authority, but by the simple fact that someone's mother calls down from a 3rd-floor window that supper is close, and the matter resolves itself the way most such matters do, by nobody having the time left to keep arguing it. From her window, between pairs of trousers, Rivka watches the street below the way she has watched it every clear afternoon for years, without ever quite tiring of it. The pushcart men calling their carts in for the evening, sweeping the day's litter of leaves and paper into the gutter before them, the lamplighter's boy making his slow way up the block, though it is not yet time for the lamps, checking each one and old Mrs. Katzberg from the ground floor, sitting in her chair, pulled out onto the stoop, shelling peas into her apron with the unhurried patience of a woman who has nowhere left to rush to and no one left to rush for. It is an ordinary hour of an ordinary street, and Rivka, watching it, threads her needle again and returns to the trousers, because the light is going and there is still work in the pile that will not finish itself. Avram's step on the stairs is a sound Rivka has learned to know apart from every other tenant's, though she could not say exactly how, only that after 9 years she hears the difference between his tread and Mendel's, between his and the Levinsohns' boys, between his and a stranger's, the way a person learns to know one voice out of a crowded room without ever having studied how. He comes in a little after 6, his collar wilted, his hands, when he holds them out for Faggy to grab at, still faintly pink across the palms from the day's ironing, the smell of the shop steam and hot wool clinging to his shirt the way it clings every evening and will not fully wash out until Sunday. He does not complain of the day, though the set of his shoulders says something about it anyway. A small settling, like a man putting down a weight he has carried so long he has stopped noticing its size until the moment it leaves his hands. He counts out his pay onto the table without being asked, the way he does every evening. He is paid 6 days a week for $6, minus what Blaustein deducts for the 2 rows he pressed crooked on Tuesday, a deduction Avram accepts with the flat resignation of a man who knows arguing with a shop foreman costs more than it could ever recover. Rivka takes the coins and sorts them without comment into the tin behind the flour bin, where the rent money waits in its separate compartment from the food money, which waits separate again from the small store, no bigger some weeks than a nickel or 2, that she keeps against the doctor neither of them wants to need. Supper is cabbage soup, thick with the potatoes and onions from the morning's marketing, a piece of the boiled beef bone Rivka bought 2 days before, still giving the pot what richness it can, and bread, and the last of yesterday's milk poured out for the children before it turns. They eat at the table that serves the flat for everything, sewing, eating, Yankel's slate homework, Sorel's mending, Mendel drawing his chair in from the front room to join them the way he does most evenings, since $1.50 a week buys him a share of the pot as much as a corner to sleep in, and the flat, for the length of the meal, holds all 5 of them close around a single circle of lamplight. The kerosene jet turned low to save on oil, but high enough to see the spoon find the bowl. Talk at supper runs shallow and warm, the way it does in houses where the day has been long enough that no one has much appetite left for anything demanding. Sorel repeats the story of her gold star, expanded now with details that grew in the retelling the way such details do. Yankel reports, with the solemnity of a much older boy discussing weighty matters, that the stickball game was decided fair after all, the ball having clearly struck the 4th step and not the 3rd, a distinction Avram receives with the proper gravity it is due. Mendel says little, as he says little most evenings, but he smiles at the children's talk, and once, when Feige flings a spoon to the floor with the sudden delighted force of the very young discovering gravity for the first time, he is the one who bends to retrieve it, unasked, and hands it back to her with a small courtly nod that makes even Feige briefly go still and stare at him. After the bowls are cleared and the pot set to soak, there is still light enough in the sky and warmth enough left in the evening that the family does what most of the block does at this hour and takes itself outside. The stoop below their building fills slowly as the light goes gold and then pink over the rooftops to the west, neighbor by neighbor finding a step or a folded chair, or, failing either, a comfortable stretch of railing to lean against. Old Mrs. Catsburg is still in her chair, her peas long since shelled, a shawl now around her shoulders against the evening's first real coolness. The Levinsohn's boy sits 2 steps down from his mother, working at something with a pocket knife that Rivka does not examine too closely, trusting Mrs. Levinson to have already examined it closely enough for both of them. Avram sits with his back against the stoop's stone newel, Feige drowsing against his chest, and talks with Mendel and with Mr. Adler from the 3rd floor about the shop, about the union talk that has been moving through the trade this year, about a cousin of Adler's said to be doing well out in Brooklyn, a whole conversation conducted in the unhurried half-sentences of tired men glad simply to sit. Rivka sits beside him with a stocking to darn, because even the evening's rest is rarely entirely without a needle in it, though she darns slowly tonight, more for the occupation of her hands than any urgency in the stocking itself. The street at this hour has a different sound than it carried at noon, softer at the edges. The pushcart cries long since ended, replaced by voices pitched for conversation rather than commerce. A woman calling a child in from 2 doors down, a burst of laughter from a knot of young men loitering by the corner lamp, a fiddle somewhere upstairs in the building opposite, played not well but with real feeling, working through a tune that might be a wedding song from someone's old country, carried across an ocean and up 6 flights to be practiced, alone, in a back room. Underneath everything runs the low, steady murmur that never quite leaves this block even at its quietest. Footsteps, distant wheels, a baby somewhere fussing and being soothed, the whole street breathing the way a large sleeping animal breathes, never fully still. The lamplighter comes by at last, working his pole up the block with the same unhurried patience he has carried since he passed this way at 3 in the afternoon, and one by one the street lamps take up small pools of gold along the curb, and the sky above the rooftops goes from pink to a deep, soft blue that is not yet true, dark. Children still out are called in by name, one after another, up and down the block, a chorus that repeats itself nightly, and that Sorel and Yankel, still perched on the stoop's lower step, trading whispered nonsense with the Levinsohn boy, know well enough to answer before their own names are called a second time. By the time Rivka gathers Feige from Avram's shoulder and turns the family back toward the stairs, the evening has gone properly dark, the kind of dark that belongs to a city block rather than an open field, never wholly black, always touched by some lamp or window's glow, but dark enough that the stairwell inside the building has become its own small country of shadow, familiar enough underfoot that none of them needs the light to find the way. Upstairs, the flat has cooled from the day's stove heat into something more bearable, and the business of settling begins in its usual unhurried order. Sorel washes at the basin, working the day's street dust from her hands and face with a thin cake of yellow soap, and helps Rivka work a comb gently through Feige's hair, which has gone as unruly as a day of play could make it. Yankel needs to be told twice to wash behind his ears, and does it the second time with the particular haste of a boy who suspects correctly that he has already used up his mother's patience for the evening. Avram banks the stove low, enough coal left glowing to hold a little warmth through the first hours of the night, not enough to waste what remains in the pail. Mendel retreats behind his curtain with a small stub of candle, and for a while the quiet sound of a page turning, some newspaper column read slowly, word by word, in a language he is still teaching himself at 40, the way Rivka once taught herself at 22. The children go down first, Sorel and Yankel on the cot behind the flowered curtain, the springs giving their small familiar complaint as two bodies settle into shapes the mattress has long since learned to expect. Rivka sits by them a few minutes, in the near dark, as she does most nights, until Yankel's breathing has gone slow and even, and Sorel, though her eyes are shut, murmurs something too soft to catch, a habit of hers, talking herself down into sleep the way some children need a lamp left burning and others need only the sound of their own voice trailing off into nothing. Fajr goes down hardest and easiest at once, fighting sleep with her whole small body for a few minutes and then surrendering to it all at once, entirely, the way only the very young can, one moment restless, and the next gone so completely still that Rivka must lean close to hear the breath at all. Rivka blows out the kerosene lamp last, and the room folds itself into the particular dark of a tenement at night, layered dark, never total, a thread of light still finding its way up from a street lamp far below, the glow of the banked stove throwing one low red eye across the floor, the whole building around them settling into its own night sounds, a pipe ticking somewhere as it cools, a door 2 floors down closing softly, the fiddle across the way finally falling silent. She lies down beside Avram, who has already gone still and heavy, with the particular exhausted stillness of a man who presses trousers 10 hours a day, and for a moment before her own sleep takes her, she lies, simply listening to the building, to the street, to the 4 other people breathing in the dark around her, each breath its own small proof that the day, whatever it demanded, has been gotten through, and that tomorrow, whatever it will demand in turn, is still safely a few hours off. The cold has not yet found its way back into the room. The stove's low ember holds the worst of it at bay a little longer, and somewhere beneath all of it, under the thread and the button box and the smell of cabbage still faint in the air, sleep comes for her too gently, the way it comes most nights, without her quite marking the moment it arrives.